afterwards. Do you want a collective committee hug? Is that what you're suggesting?
McLoughlin hugged me on the way out.
that was wishing you well in front of us. Good morning. We'll resume, so thank you. So in September 2017, this committee launched its report on positive mental health in schools, and we made 18 recommendations to the Minister at that time in relation to the need to ensure supports are in place for our students, for the school community and indeed for our teachers, to help them deal with the day-to-day challenges that they face on an ongoing basis, and to assist school communities in coping with any mental health issues when they arise. And we did agree at that point in time that we would like to have a further engagement with the Minister on the implementation of the recommendations that we put in place at that point in time and are contained in our report. And on behalf of the committee, Minister McHugh, I want to welcome you here to the committee and to welcome your officials, and obviously to welcome you and to wish you well in terms of your new responsibilities. And you know, I think that on Saturday, when we heard that you were appointed to this position, we certainly, all of us, want to wish you well and to offer you positive engagement in relation to this committee. Obviously, there are times when we need to call the Minister of the day to account, and I know that you would expect and appreciate that, but also to assure you of our support in terms of working together in relation to achieving positive changes within the whole education and skills system. So the format of this part of the meeting is that I will invite you to make your statement, and thank you for that. We just received it before the meeting, and we will have an engagement with the members of the committee following that. Just before we begin, I want to remind members of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or any official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. So I'd now like to call on the Minister to make his opening statement.
Okay, Chairperson, thank you very much, and I would like to thank the committee for the invite here today, and just to acknowledge your reaching out that we want an inclusive approach here. That's the language that I was speaking to my officials with yesterday, and certainly I see a role for this committee, because even on this report and the work you've done and the report you've done in relation to positive mental health and well-being, if your suggestions are so important and so critical, and I'll be looking at a 2019 plan, and I would like this committee to be front and centre of that plan for 2019, and within that, or at a wider level, we'll be looking at a 3-year education plan, and I would like the space and time at this committee to see how we can work together on that. We have cross-party representation here and independence, and we have all of your own experiences, and you've been together as a committee and working on education matters for longer than I have. I've been thrown into the job in the last 48 hours. I've spent my day yesterday trying to familiarise myself with a wide range of policy. At 10 o'clock last night, my head was about to explode, and I just had to stop. But my big takeaway from my first day on the job yesterday is this: I was a secondary school teacher in 1993, and the world of education is a different country compared to when I was a secondary school teacher. So I just want to acknowledge everybody that's been involved in the education sector, and the teachers and the creative work that has been done, and I know we'll get a chance to talk about that at a wider level at a later stage. Dus cahirle boilum mobuias a glachil lat féin agus le ball an chochas edges agus skillane de war na sim at lerithe agov major le chohoid na following agus the mayor slanche jerface a chorus skull. Bhailam Fostum, a Vias a Glachu live as Octan Codu, Lorch live in you, Ugs and Jesha, Hortstu, and Tolas is Jeremy, Aaron Golconkina to Janta Egmarin, a Runch live Major Les Namalti, a Kurshivsha, Horkin, a word, Duriscal, positive mental health in schools, Fia Shak Jig. Chairperson, I would like to thank you and members of the Joint Committee on Education and Skills for the interest you have shown in the area of well-being, promotion and positive mental health in our schools, and for your invitation to attend today in order to update the committee on the progress being made by my department implementing the recommendations made in your report on positive mental health in schools 2017. My statement today will primarily address the role of the Department of Education and Skills in the promotion of well-being and positive mental health, the Wellbeing Policy Statement and Framework for Practice 2018 to 2023, and thirdly, progress made in relation to the recommendations of the Joint Committee's report on positive mental health in schools. The promotion of well-being is an essential element of the ambition of the Department of Education and Skills to achieve the best education and training system in Europe by 2026. Schools and centres for education are crucial to the ongoing development of our children and young people's well-being, and we are fortunate to have schools already doing so much to enhance children and young people's knowledge and skills in this area. The Department of Education and Skills has a key role to play in the promotion of the well-being of children and young people in Ireland in collaboration with the Departments of Health and Children and Youth Affairs and with other departments and agencies. The promotion of well-being in the education community is a priority for the Department of Education and Skills. My department adopts a holistic and integrated approach to supporting schools in promoting well-being and positive mental health. The process spans the curriculum in schools, whole school ethos, quality of teaching, learning and assessment, student support and pastoral care, and the provision of professional development for teachers. It also involves other support such as educational psychological services and guidance service, and the interface with other agencies both nationally and locally. The Department of Education and Skills Action Plan for Education 16 to 19 set out a number of objectives and proposed actions specifically targeting the promotion of well-being and positive mental health in our school communities. These actions build upon and complement well-being promoting measures that have already been in place. They include improved curriculum content, including the introduction of the junior cycle well-being programme, more training for teachers and school staff, including the rollout of evidence-based programmes to promote social and emotional competence, resilience and school connectedness, the introduction of best practice models of school-based student support teams, an increase in the number of NEPS psychologists, and the restoration of guidance posts. Key amongst the objectives within the Action Plan for Education 2018 was the publication of the Department's Wellbeing Policy Statement and Framework for Practice 18 to 23, which was launched in July 2018, providing an overarching structure encompassing existing, ongoing and developing work in the area of wellbeing promotion. The Wellbeing Policy Statement and Framework for Practice 18 to 23 sets out the ambition and vision of the Department of Education and Skills that by 2023 the promotion of wellbeing will be at the core of the ethos of every school and centre for education in Ireland, that all schools will provide evidence-informed approaches and support appropriate to need to promote the wellbeing of their students, and that Ireland will be recognised as a leader in this area. The Wellbeing Policy Statement and Framework for Practice describes how schools can best promote wellbeing and practice, such as schools and those that recognise the importance of wellbeing promotion, where the voices of children and young people are heard and where they experience a sense of belonging and feel safe, connected and supported. They are schools which provide children and young people with positive experiences, high-quality teaching and learning, and in which approaches to wellbeing are developed, implemented and self-evaluated. Furthermore, they are schools that can signpost students and their parents to internal and external pathways to support as needed. The Wellbeing Policy Statement sets out the evidence base for best practice in relation to school wellbeing promotion, which indicates that schools should adopt a whole-school, multi-component, preventative approach to wellbeing promotion that includes both universal and targeted interventions. A whole-school approach involves all in the school community engaging in a collaborative process to improve areas of school life that impact on wellbeing. This will be achieved through the use of a school self-evaluation process, taking wellbeing promotion as its focus. It will allow schools to benchmark their practice against indicators of success and statements of effective practice and identify areas for development, implementation and review. It is envisaged that schools will engage with the statements and adapt and develop the best practice items as they meet the needs of their own school community. A multi-component approach encourages schools to address areas not only relating to teaching and learning, but also relating to other essential elements of well-being promotion, including school culture and environment, policy and planning and relationships and partnerships. Working preventatively and providing for both universal and targeted approaches is described as providing a continuum of support. Schools are encouraged to provide supports to promote the well-being of all within the school community, as well as providing some targeted interventions for children and young people presenting with vulnerabilities in the area of well-being. These areas are embedded in the Wellbeing Framework for Practice. It is my department's aim that by 2023 all schools and centres for education will have embedded this dynamic school self-evaluation process focusing on wellbeing promotion. The implementation of this wellbeing promotion process is an ongoing process that will ensure the necessary focus on supporting children and young people in having a sense of purpose and fulfilment and the skills necessary to deal with life's challenges. Schools will be supported in this work by a comprehensive national professional development programme currently being developed and trialled, and a full national rollout will commence in 2019 and run to 2023. This will include facilitating the engagement of schools in the school evaluation, self-evaluation for wellbeing promotion process, which will build professional capacity. The implementation plan for this policy also sets goals to promote the wellbeing of teachers and to address the learning needs of current and future teachers in relation to wellbeing promotion. Work is underway to map the range of existing supports that schools can already access through the PDST Health and Wellbeing Team, the Junior Cycle for Teachers and NEPs, with a view to ensuring that there is a comprehensive and easily accessible set of resources to address school-identified wellbeing promotion needs. There is also a plan to develop a research-based framework for the evaluation of wellbeing promotion in schools. A wellbeing policy implementation group is in place which will coordinate activity with other departments. This group will link with the Pathfinder project structures when progressed. The department collaborates in the implementation of Healthy Ireland 13 to 25, Connecting for Life Strategy 15 to 20 and Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures 14 to 20. The Wellbeing Policy Statement and Framework for Practice has incorporated some of the key recommendations of this committee's report on positive mental health in schools, and I would like to thank all the committee members for the work and input in that regard. Key recommendations in relation to whole school approach, the importance of listening and of feeling a sense of belonging and connectedness to school are highlighted as areas to target in school wellbeing promotion. The implementation plan recognises the need and plans to provide for additional teacher training and the development of more resources for schools. The needs of children and young people with wellbeing vulnerabilities are also recognised, and actions that require cooperation between the Department of Education and Skills and other departments and agencies, including Health, HSE, Department of Children and Youth Affairs, TUSLA, are included in the implementation plan. My department will continue to work closely with other departments and stakeholders to ensure that an aligned approach and continuum of services is provided to promote the positive mental health and wellbeing of all our children and our young people. Oireachtas bhailam bias a glachu leis an goste as ochtan choru and document seo a chur I bhur agus páirt a glachas sa phlé. Tá bras asta aon céiste bheith ag ball an choiste a ragart. So once again, Chairperson, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to take questions following this intervention. Okay,
thank you, Minister. And I'm going to go to Deputy Martin, so I know you have another meeting later, so I'll let you.
Thanks very much. Agus dus bara ara game gapra ort the role nua ta sulagan mar ara Oireachtas go bheiceadh gur inestiacht Oireachtas agus ní custas agus freisin mar bhúntóir ta sulagan go naithníonn tú luach ar múntóirí atá ag mothú dóchasach faoi lár. So just to say I wish you very well and congratulations on your role. I wish you very well in your new role, Minister, and as I said, I hope that you see in education as the investment it truly is, and it needs to stop being seen as a cost. And of course, as a former teacher yourself, that you see how demoralised our teaching profession is and place a value on them. In relation to this, I welcome your statement and the wellbeing policy statement and framework, but I am disappointed that the section that deals with the progress and the recommendations of the Joint Committee's report on positive mental health is the smallest section on this. So that's quite disappointing over a year later. The two key points, I suppose, that resonated with me as a former teacher, and it's the reason we as a committee prioritised this, was that it's essential we give our children the toolbox of skills to cope at a time of crisis. Because our young people's sense of well-being is so fragile that they shatter at that first crisis. And I wonder, in relation to the recommendation, looking at guidance counsellors to investigate the introduction of school-based counselling. It's something that's been done in the US, Canada and Australia, and has research been done in the department? We're over a year later on that, because prevention and early intervention is key when it comes to our children. It's about mental wellness, and how do we hold on to our mental wellness and make sure we do this as early as possible. At primary school level, we need to be talking about, Minister. So in your statement today, you referred to the NEPs, an increase in the number of NEPs psychologists, but we just launched our Future of Mental Health Care report on our committee yesterday, and something that came out of that, I think it was in June, that we only have 179 NEPs, and we have over 4,000 schools in this country. So there was, we were told, another 18 to be added this year, but it seems that some of those NEPs must be struggling under the burden of many schools. I don't know how they can resource or provide the service that's needed. And also, is it true that there's no real maternity cover? So if a NEPS goes on maternity leave, there's no panel there for someone to step in? Because if that is true, that's something that really needs to be addressed. Because if we have someone that's covering 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 schools and they go on maternity leave, and there's no one there to step in, that's a crucial resource that's missing from our schools. Also, in relation to our teachers, the witnesses that came into the report, talked about the need to really look after our teachers. The well-being of our teachers, if they're going to look after our students, they need to have mental wellness there. And some of them, it was mentioned, are feeling the challenge they may face in the job will threaten their own mental well-being. Indeed, Dr. Bates paid particular attention to the important role that teachers play within their schools. He, using his own words, mentioned them as the carriers of change, but warned that too much is often expected of teachers, and that they're assumed capable of solving all society's problems within the classroom. And just to say, I had spent 20 years as a teacher before I got elected here in 2016, over in 3 different schools. And in 20 years as a teacher, I received 1 hour of in-service on mental wellness for a teacher. Now, there's something very wrong there. So it's just pot luck that one of the schools happened to think maybe in-service for the teachers is good here. And I'm hoping that you see that as wrong and something that needs to improve. So I think we need to look at, that there's a policy that teachers receive in-service on mental wellness. Because 20 years and 1 hour, it's just not good enough. And that does a disservice to our students. And finally, Minister, just in the former Minister, Minister Bruton, myself and Deputy Oireachtas here, the Chair, we've been working on a mindfulness initiative. I don't know if you're aware of it, for everyone who works here in Leinster House. And I think it's very important that we are seen as leading on this. Because I think we will be better public representatives, but it's also looking after the staff here in Leinster House if we look after our own mental health. It's something that's working very successfully in Westminster. Chris Horan, the Labour MP, was over last week. I went over to Westminster last year. He held a very successful international conference on it. And the former Minister, Richard Bruton, was there yesterday, and I'd really hope that you'd lend your support to this. I think it's important that when we roll this out, I don't know if the Chair would agree, that we see Cabinet members there. And if we're seeing this as something that's really crucial in education, I'd really appreciate if you could lend some time to that, or to be seen publicly to support this initiative that's about to roll out in Leinster House. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And just to be fair, at the session on mindfulness, which I chaired last week, that Minister Bruton was actually at it, so just to acknowledge that. Deputy Byrne.
Thanks very much. I want to welcome Antara McHugh to the role. It's a great honour for him to be appointed to education, so I'm not going to tackle you on the difficult issues today. I think you're well entitled to get a bit of space actually to familiarise yourself with the issues, and I'm sure you got a ministerial brief. I'd be grateful if that could be provided to members of the committee. I think, as is the standard, that we don't have to FOI it, but it was provided before on 2 occasions with Minister Bruton and then Minister Mitchell-Connor, so we look forward to having that ourselves too, if you could arrange that. Just what I would say is just an observation, not in relation to you, you've only taken over this week, but I have concerns about well-being in general. I think it's good that the focus is on well-being. I think it's good that, from my observation, schools are really running with this and really trying really hard to focus on well-being and the well-being of their students and the well-being of their teachers within the limited resources that they have. But just to take, I suppose, the department up on a number of points, really. I mean, the restoration of guidance posts is highlighted as one of the key areas that the department has done to help with well-being policy. But the truth is, Minister, despite getting restoration of guidance counselling as a condition of the Conference and Supply Agreement, there was massive resistance from the bureaucracy of your department to restoring guidance counselling. So I'm just letting you know this, really, as a new minister, that I see this as entirely hypocritical, that the Department of Education would be boasting about the restoration of guidance counselling, when not only was it forced on them by Fiona Fáil in the Conference and Supply Agreement, but subsequent to that, we had to fight at a number of budgets to make sure that that was implemented, and there were certain forces at work within the Department of Education that didn't value guidance counselling. I was told, are these the right people we need dealing with our children? That's exactly what I was told by one person within the Department of Education, and I was absolutely shocked at that. So we are glad to see guidance counselling restored, but it is something that I would urge you, Minister, to watch, to make sure that those forces who oppose guidance counselling don't succeed under your watch, and that you would keep as close an eye on this issue as we have in Fianna Fáil, because certainly there was a perception on one end of the department that guidance was about ferrying people into work, into the business world, into work experience, etc. Well, that is obviously part of guidance, but it's not the whole part. And the whole part is, I welcome here in your statement today, it's in wellbeing policy, and I do hope that this does mean that there is a change of approach in the entire department as regards guidance counselling, because those in the bureaucracy who don't value guidance, I believe, will try all sorts of moves at various points to undo the work that has been done. I would also question why the allocation of NEPS psychologists is seen as a major focus of wellbeing policy, because the truth is that NEPS psychologists have been there since NEPS was started, long before wellbeing was a buzzword or wellbeing was a theme. And they don't, in general, go into schools and provide therapy or provide well-being or provide... They're there to diagnose, actually, and to give assessments of the educational and psychological needs of students. And the truth is that the lack of NEPS psychologists is contributing massively to a lack of well-being among certain students who are not able to then get the correct resources or the correct services that they need. So while NEPS psychologists certainly do come into schools and give assistance at times of crisis, they don't give treatment to children, or they don't give counselling to children. And Deputy Martin has mentioned this, that NEPS is not to be confused with a counselling service. It's not. It's a very important service, but it's not counselling, and it doesn't actually help with the mental health directly of our young people. So I think that is a little bit of a misnomer to be placing that, and I've noticed that creep in since the budget. I hadn't really noticed NEPS focused on too much in terms of well-being. That, in my view, it's a separate and extremely important service that I would love you as Minister to focus on in your work. The number of NEP psychologists are not sufficient at all, and there's a significant waiting list. And I do know that there is a focus on ways to move away from assessment, but there will always be a need for educational psychologists. But as Deputy Martin says, I think we're going to have to look at a system of educational and schools-based counselling. I would also urge you to look, and it's the idea of school nurses, I think, could contribute to well-being in schools, and that has been recommended in the NSCE report on the recent report on SNAs and special education, that a very small number of nurses could actually help a significant amount of students. I think that would be important to look at too. My other concern about well-being that I suppose has been slightly maybe dissipated, that there is more of a structure to it now. I would acknowledge that from the department, but I felt that when wellbeing was first introduced, that there was very little structure to it, and it was used more as a buzzword rather than a collective of things that were already there for the main. Now, there are extra hours, etc., but there are only so many hours in the day, and there are only so many things schools can do. So I think that we need to make sure that this is utterly focused, this is utterly structured. I think another area that I think you as Minister should focus on would be organisations who are invited into schools. They come up in certain key debates. You hear about sex education, but actually across a wide range of areas there are various individuals and organisations invited into schools, and I've PQ'd this with the Minister. There doesn't seem to be any regulation of that whatsoever on for any organisations, whether it's sporting bodies, whether it's sex education providers, whether it's mindfulness providers, whether it's yoga teachers. I would love to see some code of practice in relation to who is let into our schools be done, because I think that something is going to happen at some occasion when a board or a principal simply makes a mistake and someone is brought into a school that really have no business in being involved in the education of our children. So I wish you the best, Minister. I don't think it's fair really to be asking you the detail of stuff today, but it's good to get our view on it. I think as well, just to make one final point, that as Minister for Education, I don't think you should be standing for a situation where everything is thrown at schools and everything is thrown at teachers. So if there's a problem with the mental health of our children, the schools have to do something about it. Actually, yes, they can do a lot about it. But so what about our mental health services? What about our health service? What about society as a whole? What about family? What about TUSLA? What about the Department of Children? There are a range of areas, and I would urge you as Minister, without being cruel or without trying to dodge your duties, to make sure that there's a collaborative approach across all departments, and that the child who needs CAM service, for which your department has no responsibility whatsoever, and that the Department of Health works there. Because when a child actually needs treatment for mental health issues, and there's a lot of them out there, the well-being stuff is fantastic, but it's not going to help the child who needs hospital treatment, and in some cases, frighteningly, primary school children needing long-term hospital treatment. That's not a matter for your department. So we've got to keep, I suppose, all of us as policymakers to focus on the range of departments for where there's responsibility on mental health. There's too much of an attitude in this country, I think, when it comes to children and things that let the schools deal with that, or the schools can teach mental health, and suddenly all our problems are solved. And that's not, and that's not the case, I'm sure. So I definitely urge caution as Minister that the Department of Education can take responsibility for absolutely everything in relation to the mental health of children. And I really wish you the best of luck for Molly.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Byrne. Deputy Naughton, please.
Thank you. And first of all, Minister, I want to congratulate you on your appointment as Minister for Education and Skills. And I know that you'll bring your own experience as a teacher into this role, which I think will be very valuable. And I know we look forward to working with you here as a committee in a constructive way. And I think the fact that if you're looking at the action plan for education, it gives us an opportunity to feed into that plan, which I think is critical. So I know we're here today looking at the area of well-being, and it is a word that is commonly used, and I suppose if you asked people exactly what that means and drilled down into it, I think people would have different definitions for what it is. And I think we really need to have a holistic approach to this. And I would agree with Deputy Byrne in that a lot does go back to the school's education system. And I come from a primary school background myself, and there may be a sense often that everything does come, but it does come back ultimately to education, and certainly we need to give our children a very good start in life and start at a young age in relation to mental health, well-being, whatever the definition is. you know, if you talk to experts about well-being as opposed to empathy, if you had a scale of 0 to 10 and you were scoring 10 on well-being, you may not, though, be scoring very high in relation to empathy. You might be feeling very good and have great self-confidence and belief in yourself, but empathy is, the meaning of empathy is your ability to understand and to share the feelings of others. And I think it is proven that if you have a high level of empathy, you're not only performing well academically, but you, I suppose, are a well-rounded person, and that you can, I suppose, empathise with others. And I think we really need to look at that. I'm not just talking about children, I'm talking about right across society. When you look about social media, bullying, relationship and sexual education, which this committee has done an awful lot of work in relation to empathising and understanding how someone else is feeling. And it is proven that you can teach empathy, but you need to start at a very young age. And I think that's something that the education system needs to really take on board, as to how we introduce that. And I know that there are pilots taking place right across the country, and there's a lot of good work happening right across the country. I know my colleagues here talk about other groups or outside groups coming into schools. And they're doing that because there is a void in a lot of communities, in a lot of schools. They're crying out for some kind of help and assistance with their, be it in secondary school or primary school. And that does need to be monitored, and to ensure that we have the correct people coming into our schools. But that's the responsibility of a school principal, and they will always be responsible for who comes in, and it's up to them to vet it. But obviously the department should have a role in that, and I know that was something that came up during our discussions here on RSE, relationship and sex education, and how that would be taught within the schools, and taking into account the ethos and different cultures now and the diversity within our society. We have a more complex society now in Ireland than we had maybe when we were all going to school. So I also want to make reference to, I suppose, teachers and leadership within schools, and the importance for teachers themselves to have that training through the teacher training colleges. And I know when I was going through my teacher training, which was over 10 years ago, there was no real reference to well-being or the well-being of teachers or mental health, and I think, and how you would deal with a child or a pupil. I think teachers are absolutely fantastic. They have great instinct, they can see something in their class, they're dealing with the young people all the time, but it's to give teachers the extra tools that they would need to be able to respond to a particular crisis or a concern that they may have with their pupils. Also, I know from this committee's report, I'm only on this committee for the last couple of months, so I wasn't part of the recommendations of this joint committee, but I see there's a reference there to non-academic achievements and recognising that in our pupils. I think that's very important. And I think the arts, as a form of exploring emotions and difficulties that may arise, it's a great tool within the education system to explore issues that may be happening within a school, without having to maybe directly deal or pinpoint particular issues within students. That this could be explored as a community, a school community. And I think there are lots of very innovative ways that we can be dealing with mental health, well-being, and we need to be looking at, I suppose, best practice. And again, it's not just, I suppose, with the pupils, it's with the entire staff. And just because you're teaching English or history or maths, it doesn't mean that you're not dealing with well-being. This is a cross-school, cross-community approach to this. And pupils, we all know, we all have our memories of our school teachers, and we know the teacher that had a great influence on us, but often that's about kindness and about a teacher reaching out and understanding you. And I think it's really a culture within a school, and that is again created by the school management, and there's only so much a department can do. I understand that, and government can do. This is about what is happening in a local community, and there needs to be leaders. And there are leaders out there within communities doing great work, working quietly behind the scenes, working in the best interests of their students and their pupils. But yes, I think education is key in relation to this, and we need to be starting very young. And in our teacher training colleges, that culture needs to start there in relation to training our teachers and then providing the resources when they get into the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Naughton. Senator Byrne.
Thanks very much indeed, Cathaoirleach. First of all, Minister, to welcome you here this morning and to thank you and to wish you all the best in your new role, and I know that how committed you are to it, certainly, and I do think that, you know, working together is a very good opening statement here this morning. I suppose going back to the report, and we're talking about wellbeing and I suppose around mental health as well, and certainly I know the committee here did a huge amount of work in relation to it. I know there's one school in Limerick that, and it was the Myross primary school, and they brought wellbeing and mindfulness into the classroom, certainly there, and they were one of the first primary schools I know in the country to do it, and certainly they set an example. They were covered on RT, they got great coverage on the 6 o'clock news, etc. And I do think that by starting at a very young age, I suppose is the place to start, and you know that it stays with you for the rest of your days, because I suppose when you're happy at a younger age, it continues through your education. Certainly I know that there's many recommendations here in the report, and I'm sure you haven't had time to digest them all, certainly, but I think it's about inclusiveness and working together, and I think that's most important. I'm very aware that most schools now have their own policies in relation to bullying and well-being and mindfulness, and you know that teachers are sent on training courses, but I think it's important that it be right across the board in terms of students as well. And also, I'm aware that, you know, sometimes that maybe there isn't access to a psychologist in the area, because there are issues certainly with students nowadays, and you know, it's very important that access be there at all times. And also in terms of, I know the career guidance teachers are often trained as well, and you know, in different spheres, and I think it's very, very important to keep that training in place for all teachers right across the board, in terms of that they're you know, able to build down the barriers and speak to their students, certainly, and deal with the issues of the day. But overall, I welcome your commitment to engaging with us and working with us on an ongoing basis, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy McLoughlin.
Indeed, Oireachtas, and just first of all to welcome Minister McHugh. I have worked with Minister McHugh very closely over the last number of years, and I know I have no doubt and wish him very well, because I've seen his enthusiasm for any job that he has taken on, and indeed for his willingness to communicate. And I think it's vitally important that within this committee that we have a minister that will certainly listen and is a good communicator, and will have a good working relationship with the minister. And I know that the energy that he has over the last number of years in the job that both I and he shared for many, many years. So I'm very, very thankful that, and delighted, and congratulations on your promotion, and indeed to yourself and all your staff and all that. But it's just, I see in the report there that we're talking about, Chairperson, by the year 2023, that this would be rolled out all over the country. I think, as a member of the Mental Health Committee, it's vitally important that, and some of my colleagues have already referred to this, that it's vitally important that we would highlight the issues, and I've seen it at first hand that we launched our report there yesterday, and on numerous occasions we had long discussions in relation to young people and the fears and the concerns that they have, and I think that it's vitally important with the wellbeing that we would, as a matter of urgency, Minister, and I know that you will take it on board, that it is vitally important that we would have it rolled out as quickly as possible, that both for the students, the young children, and indeed students, and also for their parents and teachers alike. And I know, coming from your educational background, you would be well aware that in Donegal and indeed all over the country. But that's what I would certainly ask Chairperson in relation to. There's other questions, but I think we'll have another day to question the Minister on other questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thanks very much, Deputy. And I'll just make a few points and maybe pose a few questions, Minister, before we hand back to yourself. Firstly, I think the importance of distinguishing between mental illness and mental health is very important, and where we have students within the system that need to have access to NEPs and to the CAMS system. Unfortunately, we hear all too often that they are being let down by the system that's there, and it's something that we've explored both within this committee and the future of the Mental Health Committee. So that is a separate plea in itself. In terms of this report, we chose to focus mainly on the promotion of positive mental health among the school community, including teachers and other staff, as well as students. And that has to be to the benefit of community at large. There's no doubt about that. In terms of the recommendations that we made, and as I mentioned earlier, we made 18 of them. Now, there is reference in your statement that the Wellbeing Policy Statement and Framework for Practice has incorporated some of the key recommendations. Now, just reading through it very quickly this morning, there's no reference to the committee whatsoever, either throughout the body of the document or indeed in terms of the reference points on it. So just to make that point, because we did, as was mentioned, put a lot of work into this. We did make the recommendations a year ago, and it's just disappointing not to see it referenced in relation to that. And as you can appreciate, it's just been a short space to go through it, so I do stand to be corrected on it, but I certainly can't see it in it. In terms of just some other recommendations that we made, and when I'm saying this, I do accept, the positive statements that have been made in relation to this, and particularly our first recommendation has been taken up about having a whole school approach. That's absolutely hugely important. And in your statement, Minister, you say that schools are encouraged to provide supports, and while that's welcoming, we have to acknowledge the pressures that are on schools, the pressures that are on principals and staff in terms of delivery of subjects, in terms of trying to promote a positive approach to life, discipline, and all of the bureaucracy that are there. So the schools absolutely want to have our supports and the department's support, but there is a key role in terms of the department helping to provide those supports also. One of the key recommendations that we made was about each school needing a strategy and having that written down, and we feel that's hugely important, and that is a recommendation that needs to be there. Another recommendation that we made was to look for the Minister for Education and Skills to meet with the Minister for Responsibility with Mental Health. I don't know whether that has happened with Minister Bruton, but could I ask that it might be something that you would consider doing in the near future? I think having a collaborative approach with the Minister with responsibility for mental health, and also with the Minister with responsibility for children and for youth, because the interaction with TUSLA is hugely important. And if needs be, I'm sure it would be possible for the chairs of those committees to come together and to have an interactive collaboration in relation to that. I would appreciate maybe in a further engagement, or even in a written document, that we would see reference to each one of the 18 recommendations and to see where each of those are, because they are quite specific, and I think we need more specifics in the report that we have received back. But again, and Deputy Naughton mentioned the recommendation that we made in relation to the present emphasis on academic achievement. And while we don't want to take away from our young people needing to excel in academics, it's very important to recognise the non-academic achievements, and we had one of our stakeholders at the engagement that we had, Peter Hussey, spoke about the whole interactive youth theatre and community theatre element, and how the interaction can support resilience within young people, and we as committee felt that that was an incredibly strong point and very well put. So in terms of the establishment of an expert group to investigate the appropriateness, feasibility and best practice approach, that was a recommendation that we made, and we would like to see that implemented and to have some timelines in relation to that and the introduction of the school-based counselling. Minister, you mentioned in your statement in terms of the 3-year plan that the work would be supported by a comprehensive national professional development programme, which is currently being developed and trialled. So we would like to have some more information about that, and maybe to have some engagement with those that were involved. If there's a pilot scheme that has been done, I think it would be very useful for us as a committee to engage with that, and before there is a full national rollout in 2019. But it's certainly very much to be welcomed, and we appreciate that. The other point that I would make is that while we can all be certainly very well-meaning in our intentions, that having evaluation and having evaluation of implementation is very important, and we would need to see that absolutely stepped in. But Minister, I'm going to go back to you now, and as I say, we are very conscious that you're only in this role 48 hours. We don't expect you to have all the answers for us here, so please feel free to come back to us afterwards in relation to some of the issues that we have raised, and we'll ensure that all of the members will receive that.
Okay, Chairperson, thank you so much, and I'd like to thank the members for their contributions as well, and also for your approach as well on my first day at committee. But look, engagement's important, and obviously I'm accountable for a large budget of upwards of nearly 10.8 billion, and I know that the honeymoon period won't last for long, but I look forward to that as well, because dialogue.
Won't last the priority question number 1 this afternoon. You better be ready for that one.
Did you not say for the whole day, Thomas? Was it just the morning? Yeah. Look, can I just maybe go through maybe each person's and
yes,
contribution, if that's okay, Chairperson. If there's areas that we need more information, we can get back directly. Just to take the contribution of Deputy Martin Erdoes, just investment, not a cost. I mean, you know, this is education is wider, it's broader, it's different, and it's even if you take the old Irish word "idiahus," it's about the second family and trusting parents and trust their young people with the second family, whether it's in Neenery, whether it's in primary, whether it's in secondary, or whether it's in university. So I'm happy to work with you on that. Now, in relation to your point about the paragraph on the recommendations, I have a full copy here that I was given as a brief yesterday in relation to, I think you mentioned maybe up 18 to 20 or so recommendations that you made. So I have a brief and all that, and I'm happy to circulate that with the committee so everybody will have a copy, Chairperson. Regarding school-based counselling, has been tried, has been tested. I know we've done a lot of work in the wellbeing policy in relation to the Australian model, but also in relation to mental wellness at a primary school level. Total agreement. It has to start at the early stages for young people where they're entering a different world and information overload and dealing with all sorts of anxiety challenges. I agree with you there. Increases in NEP psychologists. We had a commitment in the programme for partnership government of I think 65, so we're up to 31. We're not there yet. You also asked in relation to maternity cover, maternity leave. If there are critical incidents and if they are needed for support when there is somebody on maternity leave, that will be provided. There is an EP psychologist to respond to queries and access to NEP support and development work. So just on that point, yeah, there is no panel as far as I'm aware, but it's something that we need to work on and work towards, and happy to do that. Teachers, looking after our teachers, already the text messages come in, the anecdotals, the advice, the information, but I'm getting a sense of feedback that there is, whether we call it initiative fatigue or information or initiative overload.
Just let them teach.
So I'm getting that feedback, and I suppose as I step into my brief, I'm going to get more feedback. I'm meeting the NAPD tomorrow. I'm going to continue that intensive engagement for this very short to medium period. So that's why I want to look at the 2019 preparation, work with you on a 2019 plan, work on a 3-year plan to see what's working, what's not working in the action plan. There's strengths, there's weaknesses, but I do know at the centre of all teaching is caring, the kindness, the words that were used today by different contributors, and I'm conscious of the well-being of teachers as well, and something I want to work closely on, because I don't want to talk about my own experiences as a teacher. It was a long time ago, and everybody has their own anecdotal evidence. You've worked as a teacher for 20 years, Deputy Martin, but at the same time, experiential learning and the experiences that we had is hopefully going to be helpful and constructive as we approach our dialogue. 1 hour on mental wellness over your 20-year periods. I mean, in fairness, I think there has been a massive drive in this current Parliament in the last 2.5 years, not just because you came here, Deputy Martin, but the significance of what's happened here in this new type of politics. And as somebody who's been in the position of Chief Whip, the whole consensus approach that I, engagement with the likes of Matty O'Grath sitting opposite me, Angus O'Snoddy on the other side, and Michael Moynihan at the top of the table. We had to get consensus every week, and I would like to bring that type of approach and philosophy to the work that we're trying to do here as well, because I don't have a monopoly on wisdom on what your approach is, but I'm all ears, and I think the communication line is really, really important. How we treat each other. I know Chris Rowan from my British Irish days as well. Chris is a good Liverpudlian. He's a very, very good person, and I'd be happy to work with any initiative within the Oireachtas here. And we're leaders, and very publicly. This is live. People can be in their kitchen today. It could be a mother, it could be a father whose children are at school, or it could be a child who's not at school today, could be listening to this. So I think how we engage with each other, how we treat each other as well, and I know the word respect was used here today, I think that is all important in our leadership role, in our leadership position. I know there's a day-to-day politics that needs to be done as well, but if there's a mindfulness initiative here, I'm certainly happy to be part of that if I'm invited, and any support I can give, I'd be happy to do.
Thank you, Minister. And actually, I have to run off because I'm going to a meeting with the Cancourt about the Mindfulness Initiative, but I might just ask it. Yeah, I might just ask a question and then I have to dash, but I appreciate it. I'll check the answer later. In relation to the counselling that's been tried and tested, we're talking now not about career counselling, but specifically counselling, and I'd love to know how it's been tried and tested, what schools was that done in Ireland, how did it compare to Australia and Canada? And because, as Deputy Byrne said, there is a myth out there that the NEPs are almost like counsellors that come into school and do one-to-one counselling. It's certainly not their job, or that's certainly not happening. So I'd like to know how it was tried and tested, exactly where and how it compared internationally.
I'm happy to get that information and we'll forward to you. And just maybe on a last point before you go, like whether you're a physics teacher or a French teacher, they also have the mindfulness responsibility, and they do that really, really well. And it's a whole school, I suppose, approach, which was your #1 priority coming from this committee. I don't know if it was done chronologically, but it was the first one, the whole school approach. So obviously it's about acknowledging the fact that a lot of the mindfulness, a lot of the caring, a lot of the child-centred approaches by teachers is already happening, and we have to acknowledge that. But look, I take your point, and I'll get that information to you.
Thanks, Chair.
Deputy Byrne, look forward to working with you, and certainly the questions around guidance counselling, and I have a few, just so over here we have got just a few things. That you raised the issue about the responsibility for counselling as well, and I know this goes back to the collaborative suggestion you were making, Chairperson. Responsibility for provision of mental health services and counselling for young people, while they lie with the Department of Health and Health Service Executive, we have to reach out, whether it's TUSLA, whether it's the HSE. I'm happy to work with you on that, and if it means bringing the 3 committees together, the 3 chairs, and also the ministers that have responsibility as well. I think we have to drive that collaborative approach. I know that was key in relation to your own recommendations. The measures announced by this department over the course of budget 16, 17, 18 mean that 500 guidance posts, or 2/3 of the guidance allocation, was withdrawn in budget 2012, have been restored to schools from September 2018. I'd like to thank you for your own personal contribution to ensure that this happened. These 500 posts are allocated separately and transparently, and outside of the quota on the normal schedule of posts, there is an obligation on schools to ensure that these hours are used for guidance activities. Schools can decide to allocate more hours to guidance than the amount allocated on the schedule. They cannot allocate fewer, and a guidance plan will outline the school's approach to guidance generally and how students can be supported and assisted in making choices and successful transition in the personal and social, educational and career areas. But I am interested in your point about the role, how the role changes, and the evolving nature of the challenges that we have as well. You also mentioned NEPs and NEP psychologists. I think I mentioned, referenced that already. The new circular and the code of practice for people coming in and different groups coming in. We did have, there was an issue, a new circular issue in July to update schools on what is appropriate in terms of using external providers and external programmes that may be used as part of a whole
Of course, I wasn't aware of that because I had raised that before with the Minister.
So, but you're right, but still there will be different groups and individuals.
Because I'm just worried that at some point the wrong person is going to be let into a school through no one's fault, and then there'll be a row. Why was there no guidelines on this? So I'm glad that has happened. And that's not just sex education, but that's where it comes up famously. But there's a whole range of areas.
Yeah. Okay. Look, and I'm with you on that. You also mentioned school nurses possibly coming into schools as well, and I think that's part of our wider conversation around whether it's with the HSE or the Department of Health. Focus and structure. Teachers only have a certain amount of time, you're right, and teachers are under pressure. Reference already, initiative overload. So we have to take stock. We have to take stock of what Richard Bruton has been working on, and you as a collective committee, and the initiatives within the department over the last 2.5 years. So I'm happy to do an evaluation of where we're at. Let's take stock. Let's see what's working. Let's see what areas where we can do better. So I'm happy to do that. And I mentioned the code of practice. Joint responsibility. You mentioned what you would like me to do as a minister. Not all schools to be thrown together. Joint responsibility. Look, I suppose that's a wider conversation we can have in the future. But you also referenced CAMS, and that goes back to the linkages.
My point is that that the schools can't do everything. I think that needs to be reckoned. Sometimes we forget that.
And I think it goes back to acknowledging. There's different initiatives from different schools, and they're involving whether they're schools going to build an athletic track, they're involved in the local athletics club. There is that collaboration, and I think we can learn a lot from these individual examples as well. So I think where initiatives are working in that collaboration and volunteerism, there's plenty of volunteers come into school, but it goes back to your point about code of practice. We still there's the philosophy and ethos and code of practice of the school that needs to be adhered to as well. Deputy Naughton differentiated between well-being and empathy, which I think was a very, very important point in moving into the whole area of emotional intelligence and being able to deal with the situation, and also dealing with all the pressures that are on young people, whether it's anxiety issues or other challenges from the different worlds that they live in, and we have to be able to adapt to that. But I think again it goes back to schools. So many schools do this so well. There's so many good leaders, good individuals, and if there's examples of things working, I think we have to be open to those new ideas. And as somebody who comes from a community development background as well as a teaching background, the bottom-up approach that's where the real leadership is. And whether I come in as a new minister and meet my officials within the department and come in with my vision is no good unless it's inclusive, which you talked about as well, and unless we're learning from the good things that are happening already. There's 1,300 staff working within the Department of Education. I met with a number of them yesterday in Marlborough Street, and certainly I'm going to look to them as well in terms of what they've learned, where they see the strengths, but also this committee and obviously the practitioners themselves, be it teachers or and anybody else in a leadership position within the third level, the primary, secondary, and third level sector. cross-school, cross-community partnership approach. It's all in the document. I got to flick through the wellbeing document last night. It talks about relationships, it talks about partnership, it talks about collaboration, it talks about working together. So look, that cross-school, and also there are incentives there as well, new digital strategies, there's incentives around clustering. So there's all these new initiatives that we need to bring focus to, but there are examples there of how we can work together. You talked about the culture, you talked about training, and then obviously it's down to a question of decisions around resourcing. Where do we allocate the resources? And these are the decisions which are made in the context of budgetary decisions. Senator Byrne talked about wellbeing and mental health, and also mindfulness. And I know there's a lot of work being done on mindfulness, and there's also a recommendation within your own mental health report to establish an expert group to investigate the appropriateness, feasibility and best practice approach regarding the introduction of mindfulness. And I have an expanded circular here, but just briefly, it is a skill that can be usefully be taught to young people as part of the SPHE curriculum. The use of mindfulness in education has a lot in common with and can complement the SPHE curriculum, which aims to teach children about managing emotions and developing relationships, etc. Mindfulness is likely to be useful to support this implementation, but is unlikely to replace it. It can have a positive impact and can fit into a wide range of contexts for pupil and staff. The practice of mindfulness can be part of developing a healthy lifestyle. So I think there's quite a bit of work done on that. We are considering the introduction of mindfulness as an approach that can be used to promote well-being, and I think that would be an important factor. Access to psychologists, really important and timely, and if there's maternity leave, or that they still have that support and that access. And you also mentioned inclusiveness. We have to be inclusive, and that's an agenda that I'm going to be pursuing in my new role. Deputy McLoughlin, you referenced working relationships and communications. If we don't communicate, if we're not communicating with the stakeholders, if we're not working on a two-way street, communication breaks down and we're not moving forward. So it's something that I'm very, very conscious of. I know we worked closely together in my previous role. But whether it's a TD or senator trying to find out information, whether it's a TD or senator from across the Parliamentary House on a school project, or where a capital project's at, or trying to get information, I'm going to try to work hard on providing that information, because that is critical to the work that we're involved in, whether it's advancing a new school, or updating or upgrading or extending classrooms. Chairperson, and just on that point as well, Deputy McLoughlin, you talked about 2023, but we do have an evolving and fluid change within the education system. That's why I want to tighten it down. I want to tighten it down to work, what can we do within a 3-year period? So I've already flagged that with my officials yesterday morning, that's what I want to do, and that's where you come in as a committee, and I appreciate your involvement at an early stage, because there's no point working on a 2019 plan in January, February. So, within the next couple of weeks or whatever, I'd be happy to come back in here and discuss that again. Chairperson, you talked about mental health and mental illness yourself, and the distinction, which I agree with, and also talking about the collaboration where we do need the Department of Health coming in, and the promotion of positive mental health. That was nearly the cornerstone of your report as well. We do have cross-department work which you'll be aware of. The 2018 report on the Pathfinder project, Health, Ed, DCYA, they did work together and reported on youth mental health as well. So to set up an office to coordinate services. So we'll continue to work on that, and I think it goes back again to that relationship between different departments, the communication, but also the collaborative approach. So I'm happy to work with you on that. You mentioned as well, in terms of the wellbeing plans that we have, every school will have to self-evaluate. There will be a self-evaluation project, and you talked about the recommendations as well, so I'll have an expansive breakdown of that for you as well. More information and engagement, development stage, promoting well-being also amongst teachers. Really, really important. I'm going to repeat myself again in terms of how we can support our teachers. If we support our teachers, the students are supported. They have natural abilities of caring, kindness, empathy, emotional intelligence and all that, but they also need the support if the workload is impeding in any way. So that's why it's so important to get it right in terms of what's working, what's not working, where's the weaknesses and where are the strengths. In relation to a pilot initiative for the department led by ATECI and part of the Creative Youth Plan to enable the creative potential of every child and young person. I've already spoken to my previous Secretary General in Gaeltacht and Culture and Gaeltacht, Secretary General, to see how we can work together as a department with them on the Creative Ireland project. So if there are initiatives there that we can work together on, I'm happy to do that. To create clusters and within 68 schools selected to participate as part of the School Excellence Fund. So that's something maybe we can work collaboratively on. So, look, I'd just like to thank you, and look, if there's any follow-up questions, I'm happy.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any supplementary questions? There's not. Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. There was one question asked in relation to the NEP psychologists. I think it might have been Deputy Byrne. 20% of the work of NEP psychologists is to build capacity of schools to support all students, including those with NEPs are delivering CBT, continued personal development to teachers on a programme to reduce anxiety and build coping skills. And also the Incredible Years programme builds social and emotional competencies and also develops student support teams. So if there's one message or two or three messages that I want to make here today, number one is I don't have a wisdom and the knowledge on how we move forward, but I do have the capacity to work really hard. It's my job to listen. It's my job to work on the work that you've been doing over the last 2.5 years and build on it, identify the strengths, how we move forward, and I really look forward to working with you.
Okay, thank you, Minister. And just to point out in relation to the programmes that you mentioned, just unfortunately, obviously not every school has the opportunity to roll out those programmes, and there are many more that would need to. So even if we could look at the expansion of some of those programmes, I think would really make a difference. But to thank you on a personal level for coming and engaging with us today. We were happy to defer the proposed engagement on the action plan for education, and we look forward to engaging with you on that probably in a few weeks' time. And again, just to offer you my own personal best wishes and the best wishes of the committee as you take on this large task. Education is just so important. It's the heartbeat, really, of every community, and we look forward to the engagement we're going to have on a number of different issues with you. And can I just also say it's very welcoming your inclusive approach and your collaborative approach, and I have no doubt that we will work well together. There will be times, as I mentioned earlier, that we will have to take you to account as Minister, I'm sure, down the line, but I know that you appreciate that that's only in the best interest of trying to get the best possible education system that we can have. And thank your officials for being here also. And I'm now proposing that we go into private to deal with housekeeping matters. So thank you. We'll adjourn just for 1 minute, suspend for 1 minute to allow the Minister to leave.